Introduction to Bones, Part 2, your final part of the Chapter 6 Intro to Bones. Some questions on page 198, review questions. These might be putting the cart before the horse, but which of the following is not a function of bone? That would be vitamin D storage. It does all the other things. Again, you can pause this, go back, look over it, study it. That's called studying, going back and forth on the notes here, whether it's YouTube or if it's my notes right off the website. Go over them, question yourself. All right, 2. Chondrocytes are mature cartilage cells, chondro-cartilage-site cells. They live in the lacuna, and they're derived from chondroblasts, which put on the cartilage. Which of the following is not? Okay, that's correct. Obviously, A is correct because I've already bolded it. Cartilage does occur in thin sheets or plates, kind of like bone also. The chondroblasts put cartilage on like the osteoblasts put bone on. 4. Which makes up the major portion of the bone? It is the calcium phosphate crystals called hydroxyapatite. Flexible strength of bones is because of the collagen fibers, makes them flexible and strong. They can actually bend before they snap. Primary function of osteoclasts, of course, clast is to chew, so they remove calcium and they break down the bone. 7. The central canals also connect the perforating canals to the canaliculi, the little canals, the little tiny thin cracks that feed the osteocytes. The lamellae, like laminate sheets, are found in osteons, are called concentric because they're round. Around an osteon is round. Spongy bone or cancellous bone consists of interconnecting rods or plates called trabeculae. Trabeculae. A fracture in the shaft of bone is a break in the, basically what's the name of the shaft of the bone? It's your diaphysis. And yellow marrow is mostly fat, adipose tissue. And the periosteum is that dense connective tissue surrounding the bone, which is continuous with tendons and ligaments to connect bone to muscle or bone to bone. Critical thinking number 3 question. Why do astronauts lose bone density in space in microgravity? Because the body doesn't use it, it loses it. If you don't use your muscles, you're going to lose it because your body doesn't see the need for it. Why carry the extra baggage? Same thing with bone. If you're sitting around in microgravity and the body doesn't need all that excess bone, osteoclasts chew it away, use the calcium, phosphorus elsewhere, get rid of it. When you come back down here where you have gravity and you need it, then the body will kick into gear and start putting bone back on. That's why it's good to stay active in your old age and keep going. Case study we'll do in class. So long bone structure. The periosteum, peri around, osteobone, it covers the outside of the bone. It's dense connective tissue. And underneath contains both osteoblasts and osteoclasts to put bone on, take bone off, and of course the blood vessels to feed the osteoblasts and clasts, and the nerves so we can tell if something's wrong. The endosteum is the similar thing, but it's lining the inside of your medullary cavity, the hollow part of the bone. And it contains osteoblasts, just waiting to put bone on if need be, but usually that medullary cavity is pretty much hollow there to hold the yellow marrow and the red marrow. Bone fractures. Types of bone fractures. We've got simple fractures, which are breaks. Okay, a fracture is a break, yes. He fractured his bone. Oh, good, I'm glad he didn't break it. No, he broke it. He fractured as a break. So simple does not go outside the skin. A compound sounds like compound, you think would be more, but really a compound just means it's extruding outside the skin. So a compound is just a simple fracture that is protruded outside the skin. There's different types of simple fractures. There's Aaron's finger, compound fracture. His bone is sticking out. So there's a green stick fracture, which is an incomplete fracture. There's the spiral fracture, which is an oblique angle, but it goes all the way through the bone. There's a comminuted fracture, which is more than one break. So there's many little cracks, more than one crack, basically. A transverse fracture means straight across, like a T, transverse. And of course, compound means it extends outside the skin. There's 2 types of bone based on the structure. In this picture, cross-section of the diaphysis or shaft of the bone, you can see the osteon, the functional unit of compact bone, sticking out. there's a whole bunch of these osteons making up the compact bone. It's very compact, made of osteons. The very inner layer lining the medulla has those little scaffolds. The spongy look is made by the trabeculae. That is called cancellous or spongy bone. So we call it cancellous bone. It's also known as spongy bone. The osteon is the basic unit of structure of compact bone. It's also called the Haversian system after Clopton Havers, the Swedish doctor who found it. But I don't like those egocentric namings, so I agree with them. Osteon makes sense. Osteo, bone. An osteon, as you all saw in our tissues lab, our histology lab back when we did tissues, and there it is. You got the central canal. You've got the dark circle in the middle of the central canal with the blood vessels coming up. And in those little oval black spots, those are the lacuna matata. That's where the osteocytes live, the osteo bone cell. The osteoblasts build that bone around them. They trap themselves in. Now they're called an osteocyte to maintain that. How do they live? Those little cracks radiating out from the central canal take the fluid, the nutrients out to the lacunae, where the cells live, and the waste products back to the blood cells, the blood vessels which run up in those concentric, or run up and down the little canal in the middle to take the blood, the waste to the blood, which carries it to the kidneys, and the kidneys filter it out. So the osteon is shown as that round thing, number 7. I guess number 7. Consists of rings of lamellae. Lamellae sound like laminate. Of course, that's what happens. To laminate something, you're putting a sheet on. That's what the osteoblasts do. They put sheets of hydroxyapatite on in these concentric rings. And those are just sheets of hydroxyapatite called lamellae. So again, lamellae are the thin sheets of the extracellular matrix, extra outside the cell, and that's hydroxyapatite. That's that hard bone. Osteocytes were osteoblasts, which trap themselves in after they put sheets or lamellae of hydroxyapatite on, and now that little hole they live in is called the lacuna. Remember, lacuna matata. All right, the osteon is that big round thing. You got to know it. Some labeling practice for you. Some more is osteocyte is the cell within there. On the back of that packet you have in class, the reading guide, is good diagrams, which are easy to use. The diagrams embedded within the packet that came from the book are very dark and hazy and hard to read, so that's why you have better diagrams like this one here. Number 5 is the little line at the epiphyses. That's called the epiphyseal plate. That's also the growth plate, what we call it. When it's a solid line, we know you're done growing. That's where the cartilage is put on, and the cartilage is then removed to put bone in there as you keep growing, as the bone extends. Go practice your labeling. And here we're going the periosteum on the outside. I'll go through these really rapidly. You can pause and rewind this to practice so you know what the labels are. This is all the stuff we've talked about. Just make sure you compare this with the diagrams you have that are blank for labeling practice. Know the anatomy of the bone. Lamellae, again, are the sheets. Your canaliculi is the little cracks or channels called tiny canals. Therefore, they call them canaliculi. No, I can't lick your eye, but canaliculi, canal, little tiny canals. Science have a weird sense of humor. All right, so the canaliculi are the little cracks leading out, radiating out from the central canal, taking nutrients to the osteocytes in their lacuna, and the waste products are taken right back into the bloodstream through them. Cancellous bone or spongy bone is found predominantly at the epiphyses, at the ends of the bone, but also, again, you see it lining the medullary cavity of the diaphysis. So it looks spongy. And what are the name of those little spongy things that make up cancellous bone? That's everything I just said. Those things are called trabeculae. Again, that's the inspiration of Gustave Eiffel, who designed the Eiffel Tower, the Tour d'Eiffel. So the Eiffel Tower is designed based upon the trabeculae because he thought, wow, it is so light yet so strong, and it is strong and light. So the scaffolding that makes up spongy bone is called trabeculae. And do make the bone lighter and allow for more room to put marrow in there, mainly your red marrow, which makes red blood cells. In physics, you find out that the strength of a hollow tube is the tensile strength is more than a solid tube. It just has more tensile strength. It's stronger. And the spaces are filled with red marrow to make red blood cells. And of course, they're made of sheets of lamellae with osteocytes living in them. The whole bone is put on as sheets by your osteoblasts. Again, the compact bone. I like this diagram. I put it in here for you to look at. Just a review of everything we just talked about. Yes, there are nerves with the blood vessels, so if you break a bone, you know it. Nerves that are to say, hey, dummy, stop using me, let me heal. All right, now some crazy stuff. Hate to say this, but some of my methods of remembering this aren't so nice. And me being a male, I had to pick on myself. So girls, no, guys, we're kind of dumb. I mean, my filter doesn't work. And you know that if you're in my class, I say stuff that no filter. So you might say, like, he needs another hole in the head. Yeah, for a men. See, that says for men. Okay, it's plural, but anyway, men don't need another hole in the head, but that's what a foramen is a hole in a bone, period. So the foramen magnum big, foramen, the hole in the base of the skull where the spinal cord goes up and connects to the brain. Mufasa, ooh, Mufasa. Oh, it was depressing when Mufasa died. And that's what a fossa is. It's a depression or a dip in a bone. Now the condyles, you can see down below, a condyle is just that. It's a big, smooth, rounded area where bones articulate or meet with other bones. Now these condyles are coated with hyaline cartilage to shock absorb and make it smooth when you jump and run. As you get older and you damage this, then the bones start touching bones. That's called osteoarthritis or bone arthritis. So a condyle is a smooth, round end of bone. A process is a protrusion, it protrudes from the bone. So the sternal process from the sternum is called your xiphoid process. Kind of like a xylophone, xiphoid. Some people say xiphoid, but I say xiphoid, and that protrudes off the sternum. A tubercle or tuberosity, from when they get the word tuberculosis, is little lumps found in an x-ray of the lungs because the bacteria, the Mycobacterium tuberculosis, has been walled off by scar tissue, forming lumps or tubercles. Same thing on bones. A tubercle is a bump or a lump on a bone. In the diagram below, you have your tibial tuberosity, named for the bone it resides on, your tibia or your shin. And that is where the patellar tendon attaches to the patella or your kneecap. And a canal or meatus. Now, a canal, everyone knows what a canal is, right? It's a hole or a channel. If you go through a cave, you're going to meet us in the middle, right? So meatus is another word for canal. In the diagram below, we have the external auditory meatus. That makes sense. External on the outside, auditory, hearing, meatus, canal. That is where airwaves come through, are channeled in to shake your tympanic membrane to where your malleus, incus, and stapes, your three tiniest bones in the body, are located attached to that tympanic membrane or hearing your eardrum. And then they transfer that to the cochlea, which transfers to the auditory nerve, which runs to the brain so we can make sense of what we're hearing. All those bones and tissues I just mentioned fill that external auditory meatus. So sound can come from the outside world and make it to our brain. So again, it's a tunnel or a canal in the bone. Snoopy says, study, study, study. Look at the packet, look at my notes. Listen to this YouTube, pause, go over it again. That's called studying. Practice, practice, practice. Do not cram the last day or two. Practice all along. And we are done.